frame it. Right? I mean, initially what I wanted to do was I wanted to just screw it to the wall, you know, polyurethane it, you know, of course, and then so it doesn't, you know, God forbid, you know, that it should deteriorate or something. And it's incredibly valuable now, right? You know, it's a board. I mean, it's a piece of ply that I've been using as a table for, you know, 10 years, you know, to spray paint on, but now, if you put anything on it, you know, you can get sued.
Right. Tell me the price of these things.
Well, I'm $4,000 maybe for this, you know. But yeah, these are actually, these are Westminster prices. The New York price for this is between $8,000 and $10,000, the same with that. But that's only if it sells, you know. This doesn't happen a lot. But the gallery, you know, once you hit, what happens, and Margaret can test this, once you hit a certain point in sales, like, you know, you've sold for a certain amount, you can't drop your prices, you know, because then that devalues whatever it was that you sold, you know, on a fluke maybe, to somebody with a lot of extra disposable income who just basically messed you up for years to come.
And you've had that happen.
And I've had that happen, where somebody paid a ridiculous amount of money for a piece, and now, you know, that created the market, and that created the value of the pieces, so that when things go for sale up in New York, that's $10,000. It's paint can lit. It's rusted paint can lit. You know? It's funny how many people say, well, I'm just going to go home and make one. Go ahead. You know, it'd make more sense than actually buying it. But, you know, that's just the way it works. It's very, it also, it just depends on where it is. I mean, New York is one place you can get prices. I was represented by a gallery in Los Angeles for a number of years, and this was, that ended up being pretty lucrative. I was able to make a living for 4 years in the 80s making and selling art, where I didn't have to do anything else. And then the bottom of the market dropped out, I guess late 80s, early 90s. And my wife and I had a second child, and she suggested that I might want to get a job. And that's when I went in. I had been adjuncted, you know, but it didn't pay. You know, you had to travel all over the place. It didn't pay. I, you know, did adjuncting. I couldn't really afford to do that. So that's when I went to the public school system. I went into Los Angeles, and they would pay you. I started off as a substitute. They would pay you combat pay. If you were willing to go into South Central or Watts, they'd give you $125 a day. This was in the late 1980s. If subbing in around here now, they'll pay you, I think it's like, you know, 70 tops. This was close to 30 years ago, and it was, you know, it was decent money, you know. And so anyway, Sydney, my daughter, was born, and my wife said, you know, I really think you should probably get a job. So I ended up in a classroom in Los Angeles, and the teacher, it was special ed, that's how I got into special ed, and the teacher didn't come back. It was April, and it was supposed to just be a week gig, you know, and the teacher never came back. The teacher had been hit in the head with a chair, as it turns out, which they didn't tell me when I went in. So I stayed.
By one of the students?
Yeah, by one of the students. By Laron. Laron hit him in the head with a chair. The way Laron tells it is he deserved it. Yeah. So I went in, and I was there for from April to the end, and then the principal asked if I'd stay another year, so I stayed another year, and I kept making art. And then my gallery closed in Los Angeles, and we moved. I grew up in Montgomery County, so we moved back here because we moved to Frederick County, and then I ended up going back to GW and getting a master's in education so I could continue to teach and get paid for it, you know, as opposed to the substitute wage that I'd been receiving. I don't know why, I can't remember why I exactly lapsed into that story. But It's just, you know, it's a very circuitous path. And the only thing that's remained constant for me is that I continued to make art, and I continued to make art. And there were years where I didn't get any opportunities to show. There were years where I would just make stuff and pile it up. I've got a storage facility. I've got, you know, underneath my studio, above my studio. The high school that I work at lets me store stuff there. You know, I mean, but I kept working. And then I got an opportunity about 10 years ago. A gallery from New York saw my work and asked me if I'd be interested, and I said yes, I would. And so I've been with them now for 10 years, and things are going well, in that they haven't dropped me. I think that's, you know, really, because they purged. A little while ago they purged, and we were all waiting to see who it was that they were going to get rid of. And all of us were certain that it was going to be us, you know. I mean, I knew it. I knew that they were going to get rid of me. They haven't yet, but I still expect it. You do. I mean, you just expect it, you know, unless you're, you know, you're really selling, and, you know, then you're lucky to get an opportunity, I think. And that's why these kind of galleries are great, because you get chances to put your work up, to talk to people who are interested, you know, to get it out of the studio, to step back and look at it, you know, to examine it critically. You know, when you're working on it in your studio, it's hard to see. It's hard to know whether it's working or not. When you're in your class and you're so, you know, intensely working on one of your pieces, you think you got it, but you just aren't sure. And oftentimes it just takes getting it up and getting some distance from it, and then coming back and looking at it that you know whether or not you've hit or not. And then having people that you trust look at it, and, you know, and they can tell you whether or not it's working. This last piece here, this one, because I like this one so much, I figured what I'd do is I'd actually do one that I controlled. And so I took a piece of aluminum and I painted it white, and then I took 64 quart-sized cans and I lined them up on the aluminum, and I had the board at an angle. And, well, and I also, after I painted it white, I splashed some red on it, because I had some red from another paint can in my hand, and I like went like that. It was on my glove. And some yellow, same thing. And then I started pouring acid at the top here, as if it was angled like this, and I would just go along and I would pour acid here and let it run through, probably, you know, contaminating the groundwater. But and I did this for about 2 weeks. I didn't do it every day, but I'd come by, I'd pour acid on it, I'd let it go, and then every now and again I'd pick up one of the cans and I'd look underneath to see what was happening. And then when it got to the right place, the right level of corrosion, I stopped the process. Rinsed it off, took the board out, looked at it, thought it was beautiful, sprayed it with polyurethane and framed it, because now it's valuable. You know, it's rusted metal, basically, rusted aluminum, and the acid ate through parts of it where it cooled, you know, which makes it even more beautiful. So I'm quite fond of this piece, these two, and then the big one that you guys see when you walk in, that was the last piece that I did before my show in New York. My work in the past has always been, I use a lot of metal, I use a lot of lead, I use a lot of copper. I've always done pieces that were really serious stuff, social commentary about the population that I work with. I did a whole series of pieces about homelessness at one point. You know, there's just, you know, the social inequities that we find around us. So I'd always done stuff like that. And so this was actually kind of a relief to work this way, you know, with color. I never use color. I mean, it's always, you know, lead. If there was color, it was because it was inherent in the material. I didn't add color to anything. And the piece that's around here, the big hanging one that was in the paper, it was the last piece I did. I was done pretty much with everything, ready to go to New York. I started just taking all the rest of the lids that I had and sewing them together, using all the different colors of paint can lids that I had. And there were a couple of them that had holes in it, like this. You know those paint cans that have the little plastic spouts, and you punch the spout through, and there was the hole. And it was on there on that one with the color, and I looked at the hole, and I thought, boy, I really like that hole. And I thought, I'm gonna make some more holes. And so I got my my bit out, and I started drilling holes through the cans. And that left, well, you guys need to walk around here, because that started this whole thing rolling. These, so I started, like, this was, I think, the one that had the hole in it. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna make more holes. So I started, like, cutting out holes. Well, I cut out this hole, and that led to this little blue disc. And I thought, wow, I really like that little blue disc. I'm gonna attach that to a piece. And then, that's what happened. And so I had about 3 weeks before the show in New York, and every morning before I'd go to work, or every evening, I was waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, because when you're preparing for something like this, and I have a full-time job, so my time was limited and my brain was full, and I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't go back to sleep, so I'd go down to the studio, and I would do a lot of this between the hours of like 2 and 5 in the morning, and then I started, and then things like I found this star. I was walking around with my daughter.